Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. I'm Brian. I'm the host of the Left of Greg show. You're going to be watching the video version of our audio podcast. Please, guys, if you like the video, like it, subscribe to the channel. There's going to be more content down there if you're already a subscriber, and a better way for us to get you guys some more stuff. If you have any questions or comments, go ahead and leave them below. Check out our links down below to get a hold of us and to actually find out more places where you can get more information about this. Please like and subscribe. Follow us on Facebook at HBPRNA. Remember, all these cases that we discuss and all the discussions that we have are through the lenses of what we call human behavior, pattern recognition, and analysis. So please like it, share it, tell your friends about it, and we hope you enjoy the show.
Yeah, so we are live on Facebook, but we will go ahead and get started today, Greg. So today's topic, cryptids and stereotypes. Okay, so I want to just real quick define for everyone what a cryptid is. And a cryptid is any animal which is presumed by certain populations or a number of people to exist, even though there isn't any actual or realistic evidence for their existence. But I want to give, because of this topic, I chose as my source for some of this material directly from Wikipedia, which is perfect. And boy, did I learn a lot, Greg. First of all, there's something called the cryptozoology pseudoscientific subculture. Okay, so one, the term pseudoscientific subculture is just hilarious and amazing, and that's a topic maybe for another entire podcast.
I would claim that we both can right now have PhDs in that.
We can.
I think right now.
Yeah, we actually have tenure at their university.
Exactly.
But what they said, the followers of the cryptozoology pseudoscientific subculture to exist on the basis of anecdotal or other evidence considered insufficient by mainstream science. So apparently there's a mainstream science, and then there's the pseudoscientific subculture. I thought there was just science, but anyway. So just for anyone who's wondering, cryptids are things like would fall under like Bigfoot, Yeti, Loch Ness monster, the chupacabra, the Kraken, all of these different things. For our folks up in Canada that listen, that would be, I found one, the Manipogo, also known as Winnepogo, who is a lake monster up in Lake Manitoba. But the idea is these are I mean, it's seen all over the world in different cultures. There's different ones in Africa, South America, North America, of these beings, these beasts that people have claimed to see, right, even though there is no real evidence. So that's a general understanding of cryptids, right? And then, did you want to jump right into your globsters, or do you want to talk about this first?
Let's ease into that for a second. First of all, I want it to be evidence that you and I are both doing this one at night in the dark. Even though it's live, it's still not daylight hours.
It's before 7 a.m. my time.
Exactly,
right now, so.
Because we have to speak of cryptids in hushed tones.
I think it's a perfect setting for it.
And
maybe as the sun rises, we will shed light on this topic. So
well, I ain't gonna shed any weight, so we might as well shed some light. But Brian, I want to offer a correction to the audience.
Please do.
You said that there is no evidence. Well, remember, anecdotal evidence is a form of evidence.
Right.
But anecdotal evidence doesn't rise to it never rises to empirical evidence, for example, but it does rise to usable, utile evidence if there is such a volume of it that you can't look away. Do you get what I'm saying? Where everybody saw this thing in Siberia, and it lasted for a period of time, and no longer is an anecdotal. We have to look at it and say, hey, an event occurred there, but somebody just didn't record it in a way where science says, yeah, we'll accept it. And what I mean by that is we haven't attained that even in cryptology, even in this not cryptology, even in this cryptidology, or whatever they want to call themselves, because it's a new word. I don't even know what the hell they're talking about. But the idea is that it all started when I was on a plane with somebody that claimed that was their degree was in folklore and mystical beings,
Okay. So, where did that degree come from? The
University of Dublin, remarkably. No, but the idea is that he was talking complete shit, And I
That
wasn't
would be
listening.
shite
But
then if it
there
was
was a
doubling.
person shite. It is. There was a person that was sitting in the middle seat, you know, that damned middle seat.
Yeah.
And this is before COVID, when life was a party all day long. And so I'm sitting in the window seat, and so I'm doing the letter C. And this guy's going, oh, yeah, and there's this and that and all this other. And he was talking about the oldest one in the world, the Himalayan skull. You know, when they talk about the Himalayas, and the guys were up and
Oh,
they
yeah.
saw the footprints, and then they went to this temple, and there was this cone-shaped skull, and they said it looks orthognathic. It looks not unlike a mountain gorilla silverback. And so you know, for years and years as a kid growing up, that and Eric von Daniken, I'm reading all these things, and everybody said that was a Bigfoot skull. And then a couple of years back, somebody stole some hairs and some skin
Right.
sample from it and said it was a lacquered gosh damn you know, coyote skull or whatever,
Yeah.
that had been there so many years that it had shaped and morphed. And it doesn't really matter what it was, Brian, but it was false. And that's exactly the nature of these cryptid sightings, is
Mhm.
that somebody wasn't sure what they saw,
Right.
and the story became bigger than the event itself. And I'll give you one. Did you see? There's a million television shows, and hyperbole, of course, about supernatural, and all they are is fast-moving cameras,
Yeah,
weak
yeah.
scripts. The scripts are
Yeah, yeah.
weaker than Scooby Doo. You get what
Yeah,
I'm
they
trying to
really
say?
are.
And oh, it's old man so and so at the amusement park. But what happens is they move. Did you see that? Did you see that? And how, for example, is the camera poised to watch the person's reaction? That always amazes me, right? So they just at the right time, and then we never see the ghost or the specter or whatever it is, but we see some expression on the person's face, and then hear some far off sound. That's what they're banking on. So imagine you and I having a conversation,
Yeah.
and it's a spooky night around the campfire, and we're out, you know, outside some village, and so we can actually see the stars. Brian, you've got a great thing about being able to see the stars and not
Yeah.
having the light pollution,
Right.
you know, change you, right? So here we are sitting around the campfire, and I'm explaining to you, hey, I just came back from this long trek in Africa. And you're going to Africa? What the hell is Africa? I only know Ohio. And I
Yeah.
try to explain to you that there's a big river, and this river takes weeks to
Weeks to
cross. And
cross,
you're now
right.
thinking I'm full of crap, right?
Yeah.
And so I said, well, I saw this big beast, and it had this huge horn, and you could ride on it. It had 4 legs and galloped along. And in your brain, as I'm talking, you're going, holy crap, this unicorn, it had 1 horn, it's beautiful, majestic Arabian stallion with the horn. And I'm seeing a rhino.
Yeah.
Okay. But the idea is that it's close enough that your brain starts creating this
Ye
stereotypical view of what's likely, and that's close enough, and your brain glams onto that. So when it's, you know, low light, no light, you know,
Yep.
when the campfire's flickering, all of a sudden these stories start coming out, and we
No,
try to make them true, and they're just not true.
no, and to anyone listening now, it's a good point to kind of highlight that. Well, one, I know our good friend Eric Collier is smashing his phone right now listening to
He
this,
hates
saying
us.
Bigfoot is real. But if
Exactly.
honestly, if anyone knew Bigfoot, it would be Eric Collier, I feel like. So,
And he's feeling squatchy all
no,
the
no,
time.
no.
We
But
must say that.
the reason why is like, and I'm not tempting just to make fun of everyone who believes this stuff or thinks they see it. It's actually the
That's my
exact
role.
opposite. It's we all fall into this, right? So
Yep.
yeah, maybe you're like, you can sit here and go, yeah, I get it, the Bigfoot stuff doesn't exist, but you'll fall into the same exact trap that people who believe Bigfoot would on a different topic. So I don't want it to be like, oh, it's just this small segment of the population. That's why I was making fun of the pseudoscientific stuff. That's okay to make fun of, but but
Well, no.
no,
But
meaning,
you're exactly, you're spot on, Brian.
I don't want it to come across as like, oh, you're just some dumbass who we see extraordinary things sometimes,
Yep.
even when it's not extraordinary, even when it can be explained, and it's due to our, you know, different cognitive biases and how we perceive and see the world. I know we're getting into that, but I just don't want anyone to like turn it off right now and be like, oh, you know, F these guys, they're just blah blah blah.
No.
Like
Tune in.
we all fall into that trap.
Yep.
And whether that's a sensational news story, or it's a Bigfoot sighting, or it's the chupacabra, or whatever you're at, like I put it all under the same category, right?
You're exactly right. So, Brian, you know where Windsor is,
Yeah, it's right
compared
across
to
from
Detroit.
Detroit, right
So,
there.
so if you were looking at Detroit, if you went due south, you're in Canada. You get what I'm saying? Most
Yeah.
people don't think about it like
Yeah.
that because of the way it's set up. So one night, I'm driving the scout car on midnights, and if you're going to see something, it's going to be on midnights.
Midnight, of
And all of
course.
a sudden, I see the horizon light up over the Detroit River, and I see a UFO, and it's burning in, Brian, and it's getting brighter and brighter and brighter. And all of a sudden, I see it just dissipates a few feet above the ground across the river. I mean, horizon wise, I don't know where it was, but I know
Yeah.
that it was equal with what I saw as the visible horizon. I get on, call dispatch immediately. I was a copper at the time, and in full uniform, fully marked scout car on a midnight shift. And I call in and I go, hey, you better check with Windsor and see if they had a plane go down. Brian, it was that bright. It was remarkable. And when I use remarkable, I'm using it in the clinic sense. It bears remarking. We need to talk about this.
Yeah.
Dispatch comes back and goes, no, nothing. Windsor, OPP, Ontario Provincial Police, they saw the same thing, all this stuff. Well, I had an in-car camera. You got to remember, back then, the in-car cameras, I got nothing big enough to show you.
Yes.
Like a shoebox. Do you
the
get what I'm trying to say?
VHS on your shoulder.
It was in
yeah.
front of your head. You had to watch it. It was bigger than your headrest, you know? And so I go, holy crap, maybe I have it. So I drove in, and we had a young sergeant, gosh, I can't think of his name. And I said, hey, you have to unlock the box. You can't do it, right? The supervisor has to get into the vault. And so Petey Bells, and so Petey, that's Petey now, Brian. This is Petey calling to tell me you can't use his name. So Petey Bells opens up the vault, and he puts it on a big screen in his office, and sure enough, you can see the whole thing. So now we're thinking, do we call the news media? What do we do on it? Brian, we found out over the next 3 days that it was a pencil lead size meteorite.
Right.
And the meteor, when it burned in, and I might be using those terms backwards, but one's in the atmosphere and one's once it burns in. That little pencil lead created that dissonance in the atmosphere that was seen for miles around and had 1,000 people call it in. So listen to me. If you don't immediately understand it, and your brain has to constantly make order out of chaos, it will glam onto something that might not be real by going through the Rolodex, right, the file folder, and going, well, damn, that might be this unexplained thing. And literally, by definition, Brian, it was unexplained. It was an unexplained flying object.
Yeah, no, and that's with any observation, right? We have to attribute it to something that we know, and if we can't, it's really difficult for us. And I always look at a good example is like when you look at little kids and they kind of stare a little bit longer at something, they do the head tilt. It's because they don't have the file folders. We do everything in their environment is new and novel to them, so they have to look at it, and it takes longer to sense, make, and problem solve. And you have to tell them, oh, that's this. This is okay. That's not, or don't go here, right. So but as we grow in adults, well, one, we have the answers to everything. I already know everything, right? I don't need to, and I have to put it into the category. And we're very, very. This goes into we're just in general we're uncomfortable. Being ignorant, right? I don't want to feel like I don't know something, right? And that's the best. If you look at any, like, especially any scientist in their field for a really long time, a lot of them have this idea like you have to be comfortable not having all the answers. If you want to do, like, you have to be able to say, I don't know. Here's what I think, or here's how I can explain it, but there's some things I don't understand yet, and that's okay. But just in general, as humans, right, we're very egocentric. I want an answer, and we need it simple because I have to. But my brain needs an answer. I can't just go, I wonder what that was. I have to attribute it to something. So I'm going to draw on my own file folders, my own experiences. And if one of those is, I just got done watching an episode of Ancient Aliens, right? And I got I love the guy on there who's got this big head, has this crazy hair, and he's a ufologist. And like, I
and he's
love
got the neck piece. He always has some different kind of necklace on.
Because they do the, could it be? Was it maybe? Were they visited? It's you're attributing this, like, okay, you don't have enough evidence to explain using what we know right now, or what so you're at the limits of what you can articulate. So we often then jump to an unreasonable conclusion, instead of just going, damn, I don't know, like, can we find someone who does know? We go, oh, you know what, maybe it was aliens, or maybe it was Bigfoot, or maybe it was this. And that's, that corrupt file folder, we call it, kind of jumping in there and clouding our perception, and clouding our reality, and actually making it more complicated. Right.
So let's jump into science real quick, and we can bounce back and forth on this, but let's couch this in science for a minute. And again, Brian brought up a great point. If you're listening or watching us at home, we're not anti Bigfoot. Okay,
No,
we're
I
not
love it. I want him to
anti-UFO
exist. I just don't think he
or
does.
ghost. I would love to see that stuff, and
Yeah.
I'm as entertained, especially coming up on Halloween.
Why don't
Everybody knows
ghosts come
that I
out
love
during the
ghosts.
day, by the
Yeah,
way?
yeah, but they don't. And why don't we ever have? Look, do you remember all the sad people in Lebanon still praying for you? The huge explosion in
Yeah.
Lebanon.
Yeah.
Brian, do you remember that at the time, within the first 4 hours, let's say, how many different photos and videos of that you
Yeah.
had?
Yeah.
Every single one of them, I could read license plates. I mean, I was seeing ATM cameras
Yeah.
that
Yes.
could
That
show
you
me
yeah.
individual people
You
blow
could
up.
see a birthmark on someone's face
Yes.
from 50
But
meters
then all of a
away.
sudden somebody goes, look over there. There's the ghost right there. Did you get what I'm trying to say? What is this cinema verite? What do you got, palsy? No offense to people with palsy, but it's always that kind of horse crap. And then there's always somebody that comes out and says it. To go back to the Himalayan incident, there was a doctor that's one person that's climbed Everest more than anybody else that's done it. Makes Sir Edmund Hillary look like a monk. And this guy also did it without oxygen, Brian. And he says one day he was so tired, he was up there, he was seeing things, and all of a sudden he saw the Yeti.
Yeah.
And what he described it as was a bear. And he talked to some scientists, and there was a hybrid of a polar type bear and a Kodiak type bear. And that's what the foot, you got to think of the foot impressions in the snow, then the sun hits them and they get much larger, and he had a logical explanation. All I'm asking our viewers and readers is to take a step back, give yourself the gift of time and distance, and sometimes things are more clear. And that's why I want to throw at you, our good friend Gary Klein, Dr. Joan Johnson, love her to death, Carol Ross. It's Bill and Carol Ross, but Carol's the genius there. No offense, Bill. That they spent years working on recognition prime decision making, RP, DM, and everybody can look that up, and it's brilliant. My thing is,
give us real quick. Just give us a quick brief definition of Gary. So Gary Klein and recognition prime decision making is a good theoretical kind of model of
it is. It's an architecture for theories on how we make decisions.
Yeah, we kind of we covered the OODA loop, right, and what Boyd was getting at with that mental model. Klein's very well known. I think it really got even since like the 80s or 90s, right? Really kind of came out, and then a lot of it was also geared towards, or not geared towards, it was just found more home in like law enforcement, first responder type situations where it was maybe some type of emergency situation, or with the military as well, and you had to, same thing, go through those mental file folders, make decisions rapidly under stress, and how we arrive at conclusions. So just kind of a general idea, I guess.
Which was great. And I think the caveat what Brian just said is you have to remember at home that it was a great book on the shelf that if you wanted to figure out how your brain worked during these situations, you could read it. Didn't move the bubble. Didn't help you in your human performance. You get where I'm going, Brian?
Well, yeah. So I would say it's theoretically sound, and it makes really sense to understand the process, right? To understand, just like anytime you read a book, oh man, I want to learn about neuroscience. Hey, that's really cool. I didn't know it.
Exactly.
This is another great one for that. It's just operationalizing that and using that in real time, or trying to read that book and then go, all right, how do I use this? That's where it gets
exactly, because now we're talking about pioneers in the field, and not unlike Boyd, they're juggling the water balloon. They're not exactly sure
they don't
what they
have
got
all the answers yet.
It comes out,
but
right?
They have a great explanation. Yeah, absolutely.
They really do. So great stuff on the shoulders of giants. I would say that what we look at is primed recognition decision making. So under stress, your brain does crazy stuff. And specifically, if you think of the brain being lazy, the brain can't say, listen, I'm going to create a file for every nuanced thing that happens today, because we'd never get out of the cave, Brian. We'd never get out of the car. We'd never get anything done. So what happens is situations prime us. Like, for example, if I sneeze, everybody else in the room sneezes. If I yawn, everybody else yawns.
Yeah.
Scientifically, that's called priming. So just like priming, sociologists would prime you.
I'm gonna start yawning here in a second.
Yeah, thank you. But no, seriously. Like if we use terms over and over and over, like the aggressive terms, and we adopt an aggressive body posture, we know that mirror neurons pick up on that and they start repeating that behavior. So as much as recognition prime decision making means, hey, I've seen a prototypical match for this, so now I'm going to template match it, right? I'm going to match the cards and go, hey, I've got those. I say that your brain is primed for a decision before you enter the decision. And if you look into what I'm talking about, it's an expectation. Expectations help us navigate these ambiguous environments that we encounter all the time. And it satisfies our brain's need to make order out of chaos. So if it's dark and I hear a bump in the night, do you get what I'm trying to say? In all my life, I've learned that there was a closet monster or a monster under my bed.
Right.
What the hell do you think I'm about to see? Do you get where I'm going? So
Yeah.
now I'm going into a house searching for a suspect, and I hear a creaky floorboard. Okay. Oh my gosh, here he comes. It's going to be, the chainsaw killer. Those things are in our brain just below our conscious levels, and they're always acting to come up with a likely conclusion for what we're going to see. And guess what, Brian? When we stop on a blank page, dealer's choice, man.
And
Whatever
yeah,
happens,
no, and
it's a
you
space
bring up
alien. It's right.
that's a good one too, because it goes right into what we're talking about with cryptids and different
Yeah.
mythological creatures and how it was, because I mean, you brought up a specific one, that observer expectancy bias, right? So
Yes.
we talk about different cognitive biases on this show all the time, because it's important to understand, and it's not to confuse the matter or make it cloudier. It's actually to help understand, like, hey, you're, like you just talked about, primed to expect something when you observe an event. And based on your past experiences, is like, we like to call them file folders, that prototypical matching, right? You go, oh, okay, it must be this. And there's different ways to do that, and your brain does that prototypical matching, which just means if you've seen something like it before, it can come up with a solution. And I was actually give a really good one, is like, there's hundreds of different types of door handles or doorknobs or ways to open different types of doors that you've been through in your life. Once someone shows you how a doorknob or handle works, right, you don't need to learn what the difference between a push bar and a turn handle is. You understand the process, your brain does. So then it can use prototypical matching and go, all right, I've opened a door before, here's the ways I've used it, and then figure out the problem. You don't stand there and look at it and go,
Precisely.
I don't get this, someone come show me, right? So there's a million different types of examples, but that works into exactly how we observe something. So if I'm looking at an event unfolding, right, I have to expect to see certain things. And if I have those corrupt file folders, or someone said, hey, there's a monster or there's this,
Exactly.
and especially when you
Look
bring
out
in,
tonight. Be
well,
careful,
when
right?
you bring in, it's nighttime, which
Yep.
naturally our body is already going, okay, the danger lurks at night. This is when we're supposed to be sleeping. Why are we up right now? I can't see as well. I can't hear as well. I can't assimilate my environment very well. This is much more dangerous for me at a very primal level, right?
Yep.
So we're already at that heightened state of alert. So now we've all heard, it's like the fishing story or a war story. I always say, nothing ruins a war story like another witness, because it goes from, hey, there was
I'll
3
throw a
of them out
fact in
there,
it.
and then
Yep.
years later there was 5, and then there was 10, there was 12, and we were outnumbered 7-1, and it's the
Oh,
same thing with a
absolutely.
fishing story. How big was the fish? Oh, it was this big, you know what I mean? And that grows over time. And so we have those kind of corrupt ways of looking at things. So that's why we always look sometimes to, if I can't know exactly what it is, I'm more likely to then say, hey, it's this supernatural beast. It's this
Yeah.
a globster turns
Yeah. Yeah.
into a
So
prehistoric animal that's never been found before, and it's like, oh, it was a
yeah.
baby
So
seal.
before
So,
you're spot on, Brian. And for our listeners, before we go to Globster, that gives you a chance to get ahead of us and run to your computer and look it up. What Brian is saying, and let me street it for you. Remember, non-science is con-science. So if you don't know it, you go and look it up. And knowledge is power, because if you name it, then you can understand what it is. What Brian was talking about in a really high level is what you on the street level call a stereotype. And stereotypes help us categorize information into usable chunks, because our brain engages in chunks called chunking. And it does it in hopes that we can predict the outcome of an upcoming situation without actually going through the caloric burn of investigating it. Our brain is lazy. We're lazy as humans, and we're always thinking that everything we're entering into is a survival situation because of our old programming. So stereotypes help us understand and put these information in these little ice cream trays, in these little ice cube trays, rather. And so what happens is, going in, we already have an expectation of what's likely. The sun is up. The alarm clock's going. Expectation. It's a new day. We got to get to work, and so we start going through our routines, our patterns. So people think there's a malevolent side to stereotypes. Yeah, there is, for racist shithead assholes that hate humans.
Right.
Do you get what I'm trying to say?
Right.
But guess what? They're always going to find some way.
They're over.
Do
Yeah.
you see what I'm saying? They're going to find, oh, look, that guy's got an extra toe or whatever it is, to decide to hate you, or you're a beard, or I'm a big Indian and a little Indian, as Jonathan Swift said. Remember, the great thing to do with the homeless is to eat them. And Swift said that, and it's not unlike the coyote remark that came out a couple of days ago. What
Right.
we're trying to say is that if your brain rushes to an unreasonable conclusion based on some external stimulus or schema or dissonance, you're likely going to be wrong. And this is where our ML and MD COA came from, Brian. When I was sitting around going, what's most likely and what's most dangerous, right? I was thinking of stereotypical evidence and template and prototypical matches in our environment. And you know why? Because as a martial artist, you have to outthink your opponent. And as a copper, listen, this is what, if somebody right now is wondering what happens with coppers, I want you to think of how stereotypes and how expectation management works. A subject calls dispatch. Dispatch writes down the information, then calls the radio car. That's already gone through a couple of hands. Think about the misinformation that might be coming down the pike. Then, Brian, you hear unknown trouble on Sage Drive. We got, you get what I'm trying to say? Now, your brain is working. Unknown trouble. Holy crap, what could that be? Well, it might be a domestic in progress. We've had a lot of those. Or you know what? It might be an elk that fell through a skylight. We don't know what the hell it is, right? Yeah. So that's what happens. So that's why I say, instead of recognition primed, I say it's primed. Okay, the juices are flowing, recognition. And then when you get there and you see that person, listen, have you ever heard a person when a gun was pulled on them? How did they describe the weapon, Brian?
Oh, it's huge. I could see that barrel. That barrel was as big as a headquarter, which, all so, that. Yeah.
Love Grossman. Love Grossman. But Grossman's going to chalk it up to an electrochemical neurotransmitter and say it was a serotonin level in the adrenal cortex.
There's a place and time for Grossman.
Yeah. Well, we always got to, you know what I'm saying? But I'm saying, instead of recognition primed, that was primed recognition. Your brain, your senses were primed. And then when it occurred, you said, see there. So and now we get a bias.
So no, yeah, and that leads to it, and the because that would be the question: is, are stereotypes good? And meaning, well, technically they're originally meant to be helpful, right? Yep. And then what happens is it can be now negative, or that corrupt file folder, but that's because of your bad information, or as we say, like, you're putting your finger on the scale at that point, like you're taking it to an extraordinary level, and you kind of talked about what they're for and why we use them, and they literally just can conserve calories, right? I don't want to have to overthink every single situation that I'm in, which is also why we miss a lot of small subtle cues in our environment, right? So the idea is, those are important to use and to have, but we have to be aware of them, right? There's no way to get around these different biases other than being conscious of the fact that you have them, and then saying, hey, that's going to change the story a little bit, right? I guess to say, right? Because but here's what I wanted to get with all of these is that we have a tendency to in those situations to jump towards something almost supernatural, which is kind of what you're talking about with the cryptids and everything here, right? That's how that bears can stand up on two legs and move around, that turns into a Bigfoot sighting in the middle of the night, right? And so that's kind of the thing, is that why then do we jump to something extraordinary? Why does that fish become 5 pounds bigger than it actually was? Why does it become a chupacabra, and why does it become, wherever you're at, why does it become the Loch Ness monster? Versus, hey, I wonder, why do we always jump to that, Greg?
So it's all sense-based, and your sense-making and problem-solving skills are always turned to survival, whether you have evolved or not. So I want you to take a look at a situation, olfactory senses, okay, our sense of smell. Decomposition smells in a very specific way. Our nose is close to our mouth to make sure that we don't eat fetid, decomposing things. That smell test, passing the smell test means we won't accidentally ingest it. A decomposing elk out on the prairie, that warns us that a mountain lion might be near, and that's his killing field. And so that gives us an olfactory stimulation to keep moving, go away, go the different way. it triggers the blowfly to come and help break down the body so it can go back to the earth. Everything has a reason to be there. So what happens is, in the event of surprise, your expectation management comes up with a tabula rasa, a white sheet. And so now those light and those shadows are a little spooky. So we're afraid of it. So we build a temporary file folder to keep us away from that until we can explain it. Do you get what I'm saying? So these cryptid people, they just want to say, oh, it's this mystery that'll never be explained. Could it be the ancient Loch Ness monster? No. Okay, it's not a Loch Ness monster. It was a damn log floating or whatever, right? So we create this to keep us at arm's length in a survival situation until our brain can gather enough information or we repeat the behaviors enough time to have an uncorrupted file folder. It's simply that.
Yeah. So I mean, that's a great explanation, Greg. But it's like, why? Again, it's like we still want it to be something. I go back to the X-Files. Remember Mulder on the
Yep.
X-Files was people want to believe. That was the whole saying, and that applies in so many different areas. I think it's funny. I changed the quote out for something I was doing yesterday on the board, but I have it up here now, and it's without cookies, he's just a monster.
Just a monster.
And I think I didn't plan that for this broadcast, but I think it's a perfect example. So
I'll give you
yeah.
just one more very briefly. There's a place down in New Mexico, and our good friend Yeager, always going out doing archaeological digs, paleontology, all that other stuff. So there's one place, and I can't think of it, on this east-west road that goes right into Texas. And Shelly and I passed through there, and we had to see the dinosaur impressions that were left in the mud. If you believe in dinosaurs and not Flintstonian dinosaurs like the real ones, what happened is part of the earth at this place, and I think it starts with a C, I just can't think of it right now, or an R, it turned up because the ground was heaving. And so some of them were on the side, and then some of them were up and upside down. So clearly, the people that were in that area had said we had dragons. And you can see we had dragons because they could defy gravity and they hung upside down. Well, we know that's not likely, Brian, but it's amazing. And that George F.F. Martin, or whatever his name is, how many billions of dollars did that look freakazoid make on the Dungeons and Dragons real life games? Listen, we love the fantasy. We love to, do you think that I want to go through the rest of my life going, oh, this overweight, balding piece of crap? I want to envision myself as the hero of every story. So I tell you, that plays into it too. So if you have your ego tugging, you have your chemical transmitters trying to say, I'm not sure what that is, but it might be scary. We don't want to walk around scared all the time. We don't want to walk around hyper alert. So,
I do. I walk around terrified of everything in my environment.
Can you imagine if you did that constantly? You'd be in great shape. Do you get what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. Well, and that man, there's a lot you can get into in terms of how people go around, and I think people are going around a little bit too scared sometimes. We always like to remind people I know it's 2020 and it's a crazy year, but it is you are now living in the safest time in the history of the world, and it's safer than it was 10 years ago, and 10 years ago is safer than it was the 10 years before that, and 10 years, you just keep going back. But we don't. This can get into a number of areas, meaning we often attribute more value to something scary, or that something I don't fully understand.
Yes.
Or something that's sensational. We attribute more value to it than it really deserves sometimes. And I do that with everything. I do that with every, half the news stories that come out. It's like, okay, what? This is another thing I have to care about. What? Why is this so sensational? But and that it's all leads into exactly what we're talking about. And so sometimes when people say, oh, it's like the media is always biased, it's like, well, no. Yeah, all humans, we're all horribly biased. So let's learn how to learn a little bit better, right? Let's understand how to process information a little bit better. And these examples that you're giving of the cryptids, right? There's a whole society for people out there who really want it to be true.
Exactly. They want it to be true.
And they're going to argue that it's going to be true. And they're going to get support for other people. And they're going to get everyone involved. And hey, look at this piece of information. Look at how it ties over into here.
And they're largely harmless.
Yeah, and I would well, I don't know. Yeah, yes and no. Yes,
What I mean is they're not out there trying to force me to believe. You
no,
get what I'm trying to say?
no, but sometimes it's again, what is it when there's a large number of people who believe in something, we suddenly give it more value and think that it's more true. I don't know where you went there, Greg. If you're still good, you kind of went you went dark there, buddy. So hopefully you're okay. I guess I'll just continue. Um, so so anyway, I attribute this stuff or I use it no matter what the topic or what the subject is. You can apply some of the things we're talking about and how we sensationalize to just remember that for a second and go, oh, well, wait a minute here. Is this really something that's true or not, or is it something that's being overly sensationalized? And to go back to what Greg was talking about with stereotypes and what they're for and how they came about, is it's a survival mechanism for your brain, right? I want to burn as few calories as I possibly can, and so therefore I'm going to get, I'm going to not overthink something just for the sake of it's much easier just to chalk it up to some other belief.
If you recall, back in the 60s, uh, late 50s, early 60s, absolutely every television show was a Western. And I don't mean absolutely, but I mean the lion's share. Um, Even cartoons were westerns. Okay, Ricochet Rabbit. You get what I'm trying to say? You had the what the heck was the one that was the old western fort with the go gophers? Why? Because during that period of our life, we all wanted to be that high noon character. We all wanted to be able to have the white hats versus the black hats, the good versus evil. uh, as we adapt, there's sometimes that we want this supernatural. Brian, we want the space shows. We like the alien. We like that because we don't want to think this is all there is. We don't want to think that my life in this state has to remain this way. We want to think that we can champion something else. Even an anti-hero is a hero. Do you get what I'm trying to say? So,
Right.
so we glam onto things that make us feel that there's something bigger and greater. For some, it's religion, and certain religions would say there is no such thing as a cryptid. There isn't,
Mm-hmm.
space
Yeah.
aliens and other stuff. There's other people that go wavy gravy, chili palmer, whatever you want to believe, we'll go with and we'll believe that, and that's safe too. My thing is, as long as it's not hurting anybody, I would say use the gift of time and distance. Most things are explicable. But you still watch these shows where they exploit the people, where the woman sits down with the guy and they say, listen, your children are in danger if you don't move out of this house. Brian, when was the last time in San Diego where you are? When was the last time that a ghost killed anybody? Do you remember those
I don't,
haunted house killings?
yeah.
You see what I'm saying? But
Yeah.
but we don't equate those, and they're close enough. Uh, all you need to see is how many horror movies are out there to see what a popular genre it is, and
Well,
the same thing with fantasy, and the same thing with fiction.
and then that also that's what corrupts our file folders a lot, right?
Yes,
It's the whole when you have a presidential candidate talking about maybe the police should shoot someone in the knee, like you've watched way too many movies and you have
dude, I don't
no
think I could
idea what
hit
you're
your
talking
knee.
about. Yeah, I know.
I'm just
No,
saying.
no, but I think it's
Yeah,
an important, to understand how this affects, because now you look at all these different conspiracy theories and stuff that are popping up now, and I mean, Greg, they're almost word for word a script from the HBO show of I forget what it's called, like True Detective with Matthew McConaughey and so, and I'm like, this is almost this. They took that script,
it's
so
creepy.
yeah, and that's what happens is everyone starts to inform of like, oh my gosh, is that possible? They watch something, they do such a good job on these shows of hooking people in, and you're watching it, but
It's
then some people go, oh my God, is that true? Because one, it's called True Detective. Two, they use elements from history that actually occurred, right? And then so now you're down this path of, wait, is this something? Are they offering a possible explanation? And going, no, the guy who wrote it was just like, hey, this would be a really cool story and make a great
exactly.
movie or show. And then
It would
that's
be
it.
engaging.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah.
so
Well, that's a good word to use. Absolutely. Because that's what happens with a lot of them.
so my favorite horror movies, and it's Halloween. So for all intents and purposes, it's Halloween. And my favorite horror stories are Frankenstein, Werewolf. Number one on top of that list, Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Right.
Why? Because when I was a young kid and I was eating the popcorn, they occurred in daylight. Creature of the Black Lagoon, beautiful setting, cute girl. It's swimming around like a damn Olympian. It's on land. They didn't rely on what the later horror movies did, just gore, which isn't interesting to me in the least. I've seen enough of it in my life. Or the monster has to be in the shadows. Why? Because their monster blue. They didn't spend a lot of money on it. It was CGI, so everything had to be at night in the dark. Now, somebody will say, "Well, your primordial fear, that's where it comes from." Yeah, but I think that you're exactly right. What happened is we got soured because Hollywood constantly showed monsters in the dark. So guess
Right.
what? It fed into that already existing fear of the dark, and now our expectations were back again.
Well,
That if we hear a bump in the night, we don't think of burglar, we think of monster.
and also, there's the other historical side of this is where some of these stories came from were what? It wasn't because it actually happened. It was because, as a parent or community leader, we're going to come up with a story to tell the kids
Yes.
so they don't go do this thing we don't want them to do. And
Yep.
and there's actually a ton of what call like urban legend and stuff that started with that. It's like, hey, we don't want high school kids having unprotected sex in their cars out in this area. So
Exactly.
it's the, hey, did you hear about the couple that was murdered and hung from a tree? You know what I mean? It's like they sensationalize these stuff for the purposes of scaring people into not doing
Yep.
something. So there's a lot of stories that came from that. So that helps, that adds to it, meaning now all of a sudden it's, well, I've been told this my whole life, or I heard this story and now I'm hearing this again. Oh my gosh, look at it, I see it everywhere now. It must be
Is that
true.
a confirmation? Exactly.
Yeah.
Am I now getting enough anecdotal evidence again that it seems to be true? And we're not bashing. Look, I won't bash a scientist, but when you see this, and I never know the names of the shows because I'm clickbaiting through them, or that's not even the right term. There's
It's
I,
yeah.
I don't even get me started because I don't even understand the TV remote. But there's some stupid show that shows people send in their videos of the unexplained, and then they have this
Yeah.
bevy of scientists. They call themselves
Are
scientists,
they
although,
ufologists?
yeah, you get what I'm saying. They're
Yeah.
self-appointed, and the guy will look at a video that I've just seen, and you can actually see the chair slide across the room, and he'll go, "This is the most remarkable evidence I've ever seen in my life." And then the next person says, "Well, clearly there's a demonic force in the house." How do you get from A to Z on that, Brian? Where
Yeah.
is that quantum leap of logic that allows you to believe that? Could you
Yeah.
imagine if your lawyer or your doctor did that? A doctor comes in and you got this abscess on your back, and he comes in and goes, "Here, lick this toad every day for a week and stand on a bar of soap." You would immediately call
Well,
bullshit. But on those shows, Brian, we go,
yeah.
"Oh, well, that's
Yeah,
believable,"
I could see
right?
that. Well, I could see that happening.
I
Well,
could see that.
and how do we do that? Because there's a lot of talk about, especially when it comes to stereotypes, because again, these terms, these words have meaning and they often get lost over time
Yes,
of what, and that happens across the board. And I hate that. Now, like we invent new terms for things, but that's normal in any language and any culture. There's
yep,
always like slang terms I'm okay with because that's something that came from somewhere, and you actually can give you a lot of insight. But there's certain doctrinal terms almost that get lost over time, and they get hijacked, right? They kind of get hijacked to fit a certain area. So when you use them, and stereotype is one of them, right?
yes,
Stereotype is definitely, people go like, oh, you're stereotyping me. Well,
yes.
everyone stereotypes everything in their environment. I would put it
It's an
that way. That
unconscious imperative of all humans. You're exactly right.
okay, unconscious imperative, that's a perfect way
Yes,
to describe it, because one, it's happening even when you don't know that it's happening, and it's
precisely.
imperative because it has to occur for your brain to make order out of chaos. So we, like you said, we use the ice cube tray ones, right? I got to put these in different bins just in order to get through the day. Otherwise, you wouldn't actually be able to process
You
all
couldn't.
of the information that your brain is taking in every second of the day. It would be absolutely impossible, right?
Yep.
So I think that's a good place to understand, is that, am I stereotyping this situation in some way? And that,
Gift of time and distance
yeah.
will prevent us from jumping to an unreasonable conclusion. You're
And
exactly right.
so gift of time and distance is one way,
Yes,
or we call it, the tactile patience, or taking that pause, taking that breath and going, wait, is this another thing that's just confirming my already confirming my pre-existing beliefs? And and being okay with questioning them. This is the big thing, especially when it comes to stuff like the all the cryptids, right? It's like you can, it's okay to question what you believe in and the foundations and the tenets of your thoughts, because it'll, if they're true and what you're saying is really what's occurring, it'll actually make it a stronger case and you'll be able to understand it more. And if it's
Absolutely.
untrue, then you'll be able to, maybe I was a little off on that, right? I think it's like a better self-correcting way to question those. And I don't, there's different ways to explain that or understand it, but I always, try and tell people, because confirmation bias is the biggest one, right? We just look for
And that's
things
what
that constantly confirm our own beliefs all day long. We're already doing that. Our brain's already doing that for us, so it's easy to fall into that trap.
that's my fear with thinking of first responders and law enforcement. And we get it into our mind that what the dispatch told us is what's going on. We have a
Right.
domestic in progress. We have this, we have that. So now our primed recognition of the scene might lead us to a higher level or threshold of violence. We may be expecting to see a person shooting other people. And therefore, when we get there, we think that the only tool that we have is to use deadly force. That's much better than shooting somebody in a flipping knee. Is offering training to people to say there's this panoply of decisions and you should be primed before you get to the scene to make the right decision. How do we do that? Sense, make, problem solve, gift the time and distance. That's it. Do you see what I'm saying? But do we teach that? I don't think so. We do. I mean, our company is
Yeah,
based on
but
it.
that
But
comes
do we teach that?
that comes into like that being a good witness to whatever it is. I always start with I'm not sure,
Yes.
but here's what I think. Because right there, I'm already providing you, Greg, if you're getting the story from me,
Yep.
understand that there's a margin of error here,
Yep.
right? There's very is two, they're very different, calling, like your example of calling the police, right? It's two different things to say. There's a guy in the park with a gun versus there's a guy in the park. I think he might have a
Yep.
gun because he's doing this. Like those are two, the response to those very similar, the same
Yep.
observation, right? But just describing it in two different manners is going to completely change the response of the person listening. And I don't care if it's just a conversation, Greg.
You're exactly right.
It doesn't matter. Always like, look, I'm not sure. I always start that off. And my wife, Michaela, she hates it. She's like, you're always like, well, I'm like, because I only know what I can prove. I can't tell you so only so much, especially if it's from a news article. Like, look, there's a margin of error in here, but
Yep.
we don't
So
want
so
that.
so watch this though. Watch how, let's add a layer of complexity, Brian, because we're information scientists. So let's go here, and before we make that decision, let's add this. Now the call is we have an active shooter, we have people down, we're scrambling medical, all
Right.
that stuff, and dispatcher gives you whatever information they know. Flash to bang is the time that you hear that and you accelerate to the time you get to the mall where the shooting is or the school or wherever else. That time in here
Is right here.
manifest
Yeah.
file folders. Your brain
Mhm.
will automatically start bringing up information to prepare you for the scene. That's primed recognition. Do you get what I'm trying to say? So
Right.
you're making decisions before you ever get to the scene. Now
Mhm.
think of this, right? Some of them are going to be wrong. Some aren't going to pass
Yep.
the test. It's like Plinko. Some will fall out. There's not 7 of them. I don't have a cover car. I only have my pistol. You get what I'm trying to say? So those are falling like teardrops out, raindrops out of the sky. And all of a sudden you have now these flashlight size, not laser yet, flashlight size decisions that are available to you. That's normal. That's what's supposed to happen. Now, with training, those are going to follow a logical pattern, and then above and below those, just like the color spectrum, there's some that we can't see, is going to be your own fears and biases. You get what I'm trying to say? And the unknown. But
Right.
now you've got almost like this chart of possibilities through training and rehearsal. The untrained mind, Brian, is going to go in there and just have, it's going to look like snow on a county road at night. You get what I'm trying to say?
Mhm.
And you hit the high beam headlights, and there's going to be too many choices. That's how people get analysis paralysis.
Right.
That's how people get injured and died. So what we're talking about is a function of that. We're talking about being so overwhelmed by the environment, seeing that bright light in the woods or seeing that bear stand up on hind legs to get honey or whatever. And then we immediately go to the worst case scenario. Why? Because our brain hasn't been trained to assimilate what's logical, what's most likely, what it could be. Am I saying that there's no gosh damn Bigfoot? I'm saying nope, but I'll change my opinion when somebody shows me one.
Oh,
You know,
yeah, that no,
you get
that's a
what I'm
good
trying to say?
that's a good point. No, and that's the idea. It's not no, and there never will be. It's no,
Exactly.
there isn't
Yep.
until there's evidence of one. No, no, and that's then you can update, right? I can take in new
That's what
information and
scientists do, Brian.
update my hypothesis and update my file folders and kind of have another way to look at it. So no, that's actually a great point to kind of sort of bring it in for
Yeah.
a landing, I guess, on this. And you know, that's how I try to approach everything with some time and distance. Right now, there's certain
Yes.
situations where you're just going to react, but if you're always reacting, you're gonna fall on some sort of corrupt file folder,
Pinball.
or you know, you're something that is gonna you're gonna think is gonna be true and exists and is happening, and it's very very different from what's actually occurring, and that's difficult. We see that stuff all the time in different after action reviews. Well, I thought I saw this, and then this happened, and then the camera's saying, well, that's not what it's showing here, and the guy's going no, or girl's going no, no, you don't understand. And he was doing, and they're not lying necessarily
Because in here,
in your
that's what
brain.
they
Yeah,
saw, felt,
it's
smelled, tasted. You're exactly
so
right.
it's and you brought it up earlier, and it's a good point to reiterate. As long if something is cognitively close enough, that's all my brain needs to go, yep, that's what it is, that's what I saw, even if it's not the real thing, right? Even if
Yep.
it's not exactly what I think it is. So I think those are just good points to remember. And also remind everyone, if you enjoy the podcast, please share it with your friends. Go down, like it, rate us, give us 5 stars, hopefully. It helps and kind of helps boost the show. And so also too, if you're interested in a specific topic, always just reach out to us. Hit that leftofgreg@gmail.com, and we can cover something in depth. We love hearing back from you guys and girls out there who are listening, so that we can get other content for the show and do different topics and bring in things that we haven't discussed before. We would really enjoy that. So please reach out to us, and then don't forget that training changes behavior.